right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the library for Junior Parents Night. I know we heard from a lot of you that you're watching from home, which is great. And if you can't watch the whole thing from home, we will have a recording available later this week. Since if you're not here, you're missing the chocolates and Pellegrino we have in the back. So
and great company.
Yes. So please get whatever you need and ask questions as much as you'd like to throughout our presentation. So, as Amy and I are both parents, I think this is sort of how you might be feeling at this time, that we're finally here at this juncture, and we've been having freshman and sophomore parents meetings with you all along the way, and now the process is really starting in earnest with your kids, and I know there's lots of feelings attached to that, but we're here to support you all along the way. And I think I know most of you, but my name is Mimi Chutlish. I'm the Director of College Counseling here. This is my 17th year at VES. I have a sophomore currently, teach the 9th grade critical thinking class, and I think this was the first group I got to teach. So I've known your kiddos from the very beginning, and that's been such a treat and a joy. So that's me.
And my name is Amy Kadelka, and I'm the Associate Director of College Counseling. This is I can't really do the math right now, 2001 was when I started, and took a little sabbatical, came back. I have 3 kids, one graduated and is a sophomore in college, one is a junior, and I have a sophomore as well. And I'm laughing at when Mimi says, and we're finally here, because those of you who are here live, this is really your first, y'all are here, and for most of you guys, this is your first time going through this process.
With some exceptions.
With some exceptions, yeah.
Yeah. Come on in. My name is Jenna Vermilia. My husband went here at VES, so he is native to Lynchburg. So we moved back to the area a couple years ago. And I wanted my own experience at VES. I had heard all the wonderful things and what a great community it was. And so this was my opportunity to be a part of VES. And so I help students with AP testing and also the SAT, ACT, thinking about those, their practice tests, things like that. So some of those are coming up in April. Your kids may have signed up for those at a new gal. So if you have questions about standardized testing, come find me.
Yes, we're so lucky to have Jenna here. Yes. She keeps us all in line. I keep us from UVA admissions too, so she has a wide range of knowledge about the process. And at some point, we are lucky that Matt Porter will be joining us. He is driving a shuttle bus filled with students back now, and they're just, I think, a smidge delayed, but he'll be coming in. As I think a lot of you know, he worked in our admissions office here. He's the head football coach. I can't say enough about the rapport that Matt has with students. We've actually lucked out. We got to change our office location from the little hallway, old dorm rooms and offices we have. We now have the space that was Hopkins Writing Center, the whole thing for college counseling, which is amazing. Matt's definitely the most popular.
We used to like to think that we attracted kids down our hallway. Now it's like a whole blow.
They're like, is Mr. Porter here? Okay, bye. So, and it's funny, in my critical thinking class too, we, all the college counseling team comes in to work with the kids some, and I've had multiple students ask me how they can make sure that Mr. Porter's the college counselor. I'm like, well, I'll take a note and reference this. Thank you. So, we're just so lucky to have him on our team as well. Okay, I always just love to show the portrait of a VES graduate at this point, because all of the 5 pillars of this document, which is really our promise to parents and students that we will help cultivate these qualities in their students all along the way, each one of these is so important to the college admissions process. So they're relevant, to the new 9th grader, but whether it's, a quality that college admissions offices are hoping to see in their applicants, or questions that students are going to have to answer on their applications, every single one of these brings out through the process. And I feel, you know, there's certainly no like big test of the portrait of a graduate at the end of a student's VES career, but it all sort of plays out in real time through the college admissions process.
And actually, I just want to add, this is funny, Mimi, I didn't tell you this. My sophomore daughter is applying to different positions at her university and was really excited, just found out over the break she earned these positions, and she used some of the language on the portrait of a graduate because she felt like authentically she is a graduate and this was true. She's ready to navigate this world. And so she was like, it was just so easy to answer the questions without being prompted by her mother. And I was like, oh, she remembered something. That was good. That was really good.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a quick look at what's on the agenda. It is a lot of information. Please stop us along the way and ask questions. We're going to go over all the ingredients or elements that are in a college application. I think sometimes that seems mysterious. We'll make it not mysterious. We're going to clarify how you can stay in the loop with your child's process all along the way. Then we'll give you some of our best tips to make sure your life doesn't become completely taken over by this process for the next 14 months. And then we'll go over some of the unique challenges of college admissions today. I was like, do I write post-COVID-19 era? Is there ever a post-COVID? I don't know. So every time I write this, I just have it in parentheses with a question mark because I didn't know what to do. And then some last recommendations too. And it's us, so we segue. We try not to, but we digress. Okay, Amy, you're
Okay, the ingredients. So this presentation, the next few slides, is the presentation that your students will see in the next 2 weeks and what they will be working on. So ingredients in a college application, first and foremost, how do they apply? All of our students will use the Common Application. In the application process, when you all apply to schools, you may remember that the Common Application happening. Some of us, it was paper, it was 8 pages, and it was stapled together. For those of us who are older, we didn't have the Common Application, we used individual institutional applications. Now it's great, so many levels. We have the Common App, it's not so great in the number of applications kids can send, but the application, the Common App is what I would say 100% of our students use this year. There's a few exceptions, the UC schools, some of the UC schools have their own application. University of Texas switched over to the Common App. We cheer when big schools start using the Common App. It's just a really nice hub where our kids, they log in and they've got everything right there.
Yeah, they don't have to fill out the basic information over and over.
Right. So basic information, truly, we demystify this for your kids. In the next 2 weeks, each one of your students will have a Common App account. It's the real deal, the one they'll use to apply to schools. We'll be asking our students this year to use Gmail accounts or anything other than their VES accounts. For whatever reason, we've noticed a lot of colleges that have gone to third-party senders, so some of our students aren't getting the information they should with the VES account, so we're going to be using Gmails. Very directory information, basic information, name, address, where they went to school. Truly, start to finish, students can finish the majority of that application through when they start writing their activities in about 45 minutes to an hour. It is not.
You can get up to there, the activities section, in 45 minutes. You might have to like text your parents a couple times.
Right. And we do, we have students doing that. But so we work through this, we introduce it. Students by no means will be finished with this application in 2 weeks, but we want the students to see what it looks like, to find out what information our school's looking for. So we're using this as a tool too for students to be thinking like, oh, each college is going to maybe ask for some unique things, but the main application just is very here. Plain, this is what it looks like. Activities section requires more thought. Mimi and Matt and I talk to students about any time you are able to present in writing anything to schools, it really needs to be nice, polished, grammar correct. Activities section, there is like 150 characters to describe an activity. And so, we have our students brainstorm, and it's sort of a mini writing lesson in how to bring all this stuff, everything you've done into economy of words. We we get it all in 150 characters. So activities section,
And you have
we
10 boxes for different activities, that's it.
right. And it's really funny because sometimes students are like, I don't have anything to put in here. I can think of 3 things. And then as we talk to students and then ask questions, it's like, oh, I can put that? I do play guitar.
Yeah.
All right, wait a minute, I do like writing poetry. And so it's not anything, it can be everything official, and it's also how students spend time outside the classroom. And then the main essay, that's a whole different session, one that we love to talk about, but we are here to support students through start to finish the application, including the essay. And our kids come up with some great essay ideas. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and I was just gonna jump in and say, in the chatbot era and the age of, this is a huge issue in college admissions right now, essays and authenticity. And this is just, I think, such a strength for our students. They learn to write with so much voice. I think it's always helped them, and it's gonna be helping them now more than ever. That colleges will say, like, okay, I'm really getting to know this kid through this, and there's nothing chatbot-esque about what this child is sending our way.
And it is great. Our English teachers are on it, talking about the ChatGPT and what it means and what's coming out of it. And we did have a student or two try to use a ChatGPT answering why a certain school, why Vermont. And
Just to see what would happen.
just to see what happened, and it came out great, beautiful, very technical information about the school. There was nothing in that had the student's voice at all. And so I was like, wait, you could send this, but the school's not learning anything about you. The question was, why Vermont for you? And so, that's when we really talk to kids about, that's when visiting is so important, because you're gonna be able to answer these questions really genuinely and authentically. If you have visited the school, researched the mission, all the things we're going to talk about today. And then the little supplementary essays, and that is many schools we're finding do ask that question, why Elon, why Vermont, why College of Charleston, why Dartmouth? And so, the students that visit, the students that have gone online, that have done the research, they're really able to answer this question in a nice way. And then the residency, we put residency here because it really is important if students are applying to their in-state schools. Virginia, for example, we know Virginia, they like Virginia students. North Carolina likes North Carolinian students, to the point where the Board of Trustees has voted for North Carolina schools, 82% need to come from the state of North Carolina. So lots of questions, gleaning residency, that's when the students ask you lots of questions like, Mom, when did we buy our house? When did you register to vote? When did you, and you're like, why are you asking me this? And so colleges like to see where students are from.
So everything from like above this line, including the main college essay, is the same for all the colleges students apply to, but it's below here that it varies and it's different. But once they have all the pieces for each college, they pay the fee. So there is, what would you say, fees? There are some schools that don't charge a fee at all. That's awesome.
If you visit, you get an application waiver for many schools.
Yeah. Some are $50, some are
100. There was a couple.
So it's something to be aware of. There is a fee. A lot of them have an honor statement, or the Common App does, showing that it's all your work. This is true. If there's anything changes, you'll let us know. And then they hit submit. So, but we have to let students know when we start their Common App that they're not going to accidentally submit it anywhere. They're very afraid of that at first. Yes. Like, what if I accidentally? You can't. It makes you like preview it and recognize that it's all correct and you're ready to send so many times. So, no way to accidentally submit.
It doesn't correct grammar or spelling errors, but the students do that.
Yes. And we checked.
Oh, we
don't
checked
worry.
it.
So the high school transcript is the next part. So students submit their Common App, and that starts their file. Then it's our turn to send in documents. The transcript is the single most important document in the admissions process. It's what gets the most weight when admissions officers are reviewing a student's file. It's really what determines whether the student is in the ballpark of what the college is looking for. So again, the transcript shows the complete record, 9th through start of senior year. of the courses they've taken or are enrolled in and the grades they've earned each semester. So we submit the transcript through our office. More and more colleges, though, are asking students to self-report their grades, and that can be sort of a cumbersome piece of the puzzle. That's it's called this SRAR, yeah, self-reported academic record, where students, and it's hard if a student's transferred too, because they need all of their transcripts, they need to enter in all the classes they've taken and the grades earned. So just another thing we have to help with sometimes, but that's fine. If a student's submitting an application prior to January, which almost all of them do, they will not have any grades from their senior year. So we've made sure in our one-on-one meetings with them that they know that really this semester right now, sort of the last set of grades that colleges will see for sure before they're making a decision. So that's a little like moment for a lot of them. But that means the strength of the applicant's senior schedule, which is there on the transcript, is a very important factor being considered. So we worked with each of your kids, helping determine their schedule for next year. And as you know, like we could still make little tweaks if we have to, but we help shape that with college admissions in mind.
And just a plug for why we don't want to wait until the night before an application is due. The sending the transcript part is great, and we do that. The SRAR piece, just to put a plug in, what we did find for some schools is they want that SRAR when students have to self-report their grades. There's deadlines for that in addition to the application. So the sooner we sort of have the plan for, you know, when everything is submitted, the students aren't caught like, oh, now I moved from regular decision to early action. So we want to make sure that we pay good attention to those deadlines.
All right, we also send along a copy of our school profile, which gets updated every year. This has a list. This is the front page, but it talks about distinctive programs at VES. It lists all the classes that we offer. And on the back, it has the matriculation list of the colleges our students have attended in the past 5 years. So most admissions reps say this is sort of where they start when they're reviewing an application, especially if it's a school that doesn't get a whole ton of VES applications. They first familiarize themselves with VES by reading our school profile and making sure they understand the opportunities that are available to students.
And it is, Mimi and I are both members of our, the Facebook college admissions groups, and so sometimes it gets really heated and it's fun, and we text each other at like 11 at night. Did you see what such and so said to such, you know, it's our little Survivor or whatever. But there's always conversations about the school profile and how, you know, people like us and on college counseling side are asking colleges, like, do you really pay attention to the school profile? Like, how much? I'm changing mine up. How are you doing it? And the colleges are like, yes, this is so important. The cleaner, the better. We want to glean what is your, you know, what's your school all about? And so, if you get a chance to go online and look at this document, it's great because it's very clear what our school is about, what our students looking at ranges of information. It's very helpful.
Yeah, all the academic policies are in there, and it's very helpful. And this is always a big, it's sort of never been a bigger issue than the last few years. Test scores are often an important part of the process, what colleges want, but not so much anymore. Most colleges are test optional at this point. They've maintained the policies they adopted during COVID. We'll talk more about this later too. There are some schools that are just recently adding back an expectation that students send test scores. And it's sort of a smattering of all different types of schools that are doing that. But the important thing to know is that we will decide whether a student's test scores should be sent on a school-by-school basis. And the way we typically do that is by looking at the median test score of students who were admitted the previous year. And if our students' test score is higher than that, then we definitely send it. But if it's not, then you probably don't want to, even if that score is really good. And that can be really hard. Like if a student, like a 32 ACT score is amazing and it's awesome, and especially if a student worked really hard to earn that. But if they're applying to Duke, which has a 34 ACT score median, then you don't send it. even though you're like.
And
very
the
proud of
conversations in our
yourself.
office are like, what do you mean? I love, do you know how much prep I
I
did?
know. It's
I
really
love
hard.
this score. And we were like, right, but we've got to go back to the analytics. What is it?
Yeah.
You know, what is
Yeah, and I'm happy so far looking at this current senior class, and they don't have all their decisions back. They will by the end of next week. But I think probably the biggest like happy surprise results have been students who applied test optional to school. So no.
And it is very school specific.
Yes.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the.
Yeah, and we'll go over some more specific schools where it's very important to pay attention to their policies. Typically, schools want the ACT or SAT scores to be sent directly through the testing agency. That is it a $14 fee? 12. Okay, $12 fee to send them. Some schools are loosening that expectation, and they'll just accept the score that's entered on the common application. But that's just something we have to pay attention to make sure the file's complete. AP scores never have to be sent officially, which is really nice. And students get to pick which ones they send. So if a student has, taken 4 APs and they got 4s and 5s on 3 of them and had a bad day and got a 2 on another one, they don't have to send that 2. And sometimes they're like, well, won't they know it was bad? No, they won't. They don't know. And they don't have time to do research. They are going to, maybe you were sick. Maybe you didn't take it. Maybe who knows what. But they're just going to use those 4s and 5s that were sent.
And just to clarify, APs definitely do not have to be sent officially through the application process. The end of the senior year, when students are taking APs, that's when they do need to indicate if they want their scores sent to colleges through the College Board. So that whole official thing happens at the end of their senior year.
Yeah, once they've already picked where
Yes.
they're going. Yep. All right. So again, is test optional? This is sort of what I was talking about. It usually, yes, you want to use the test optional policy unless your score is above the median. And this Fair Test website is a great one to reference. It's the place where schools' testing policies are continuously updated. So you can see at schools your child's interested in what their expectations are in terms of testing. Fair Test loves test optional. They're very pro test optional at this organization.
And we love test optional too.
Yes.
I would just say, during COVID, some of our students were like, wait, I don't have to take the test at all. And we, we're like, no, you act for 99% of the schools, no. And
Except
so,
Florida Publix.
Except for, Georgia and Florida. But anyway, so then we've kind of, fought at that time, the answer was just going to be no test scores. And now we've kind of, we wax and wane, and as Mimi said, every student is really different, and whether or not they want to take the test or if they should take the test, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Do you want to jump in?
Yes. So one of the things that we love about VES is how well we get to know your kids, how well the teachers know your kids. And every application, the majority of applications will ask for a counselor letter, which Mimi, Matt, or I will write. It's sort of a collective, this is the bird's eye view of your student from VES. Where are they academically? How are they doing in their afternoon activities? How are they as a student at VES? Where are they shining? Where are we seeing the student? And then we have students ask 2 teachers for recommendations. Usually those teachers are going to be from a humanities area and maybe math or science. And the teachers really focus in that spotlight of how the student is doing academically in the classroom. So the colleges are getting information about who the student is from our school's perspective, and then academically in the different classes. So, and then Mimi and Matt and I, we will send those applications through SCORE, which we'll talk about in a minute. And many of you all have registered already in SCORE and can see the students' information. That's also the hub that we're going to send our students, teacher, and counselor recommendations.
You don't get to read the recommendations, though.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
But we do, and we love reading teacher
Yes,
recommendations.
Yes, there's a FERPA waiver that students have to sign where they release the right to review the recommendations. But we read them all, and we promise you they're all very lovely and wonderful. Yes, so our counselor rec, I always say it's like the wide angle lens or the floodlight, and like Amy said, the teacher wants sort of the spotlight just on how the student performs in the classroom. There are special cases where additional information is needed to complete an application. International students often have to complete financial verification forms and residency information that can be a pain for them. Art students very often have to complete a portfolio, and every school is really different, not to generalize, but just like you would imagine, art schools like to be very individualistic. They have each their own expectations and way of asking students to submit their work and their portfolio, and the deadlines vary on those, so we need to pay attention to that. And athletes sometimes put together an athletic resume that's separate because, right, to talk about, like maybe one student's basketball background is not going to fit that 150 characters. So they might write a more detailed description of their involvement in the sport, and there's an additional information section where they can share that.
And Matt has been great this year in adding, corralling some of our students that we know need to fill out the NCAA clearinghouse, that are really sure they want to participate in Division I or Division II athletics, and that is totally a different thing. And I would just like to add, art students, this is maybe one of the first years that I've had students who have not gone to an art school but are taking AP Art, that are really excited and very proud about some of the work they've done, that have submitted portfolios and like through their Common App. And that's just sort of bolstered the application and shown like, oh, this student is really multidimensional. They're doing this well in the classroom, but also here's the portfolio and their AP class as well.
So those are really the elements that go into a complete application. Again, these are just extras for some students. The only pieces that your student hits submit on are what is on the Common App. And then our office sends the rest, unless it's one of those schools that wants that self-reported academic record. And then students have to hit submit on that too. And it's sending test scores as well. But all the school profile, the recommendations, the transcripts, we send along. All right. This is a document that, just to, I think, loop back to the importance of that transcript. The National Association of College Admissions Counselors, it's been a while since I checked to see if they have an updated one. This is from the 2018-2019 report. They survey college admissions offices, and they ask them what factors in the application are most important in helping them make their decisions. And as you can see, and this is the same year after year, it's grades in all courses that for 74.5% of schools have considerable importance. And then grades in college prep courses next. So the top two things are their grades. Next is the strength of their curriculum, right? And again, their courses are all listed on that transcript. And that's why we say the transcript's so important in the process. Test scores, again, this survey was last given pre-COVID, so it'll be very interesting to see on the next one where test scores fall. But that's a huge drop from the transcript-oriented information, right? 62.1% considerable importance for curriculum. Then it drops to 45.7 for test scores, and that's before all the COVID stuff. And then the next piece is, again, you see another big drop when it comes to essays. Then I'm going to skip demonstrated interest for a second. Counselor rec, teacher rec, like we talked about. Class rank, because so many schools don't use class rank. We don't use class rank. You see that's not of high importance. Their activities are next, and it kind of goes on down from there. But I think this is important to keep in mind when you're considering what's most important in admissions.
And one of the things that we talk to your students about is when the test scores are removed, what becomes more important? And it was interesting when we talked to juniors and asked that, they were right on. What becomes more important are grades. How different schools have different institutional priorities. And so when schools are looking at our students and you take the test scores out, then the other more narrative pieces of the application become more important.
Right. And something I think when they run this survey again, that demonstrated interest that I skipped over, I know a bunch of you had college visits this spring break, which is great. Visiting schools, showing them you're sincerely interested has become more and more important again, I think in the absence of those test scores and with the increased number of applications, right? Like schools need to try to guess of all these thousands of kids who applied, who will actually come here if we admit them? And that's where that demonstrated interest piece is so important. But even more than visiting campuses, which is so great, and we all need to be on a team, like with you guys with this office, is opening emails. Like that is the most important
It sounds so
piece.
simple.
I know, but it's so very hard for so many high schoolers to open the emails they receive from colleges. That's tracked. Not every school, but like more and more schools are using that metric to gauge a student's interest in the institution. And like when things go awry in the admissions process, 9 times out of 10, it's because a student was sent information in an email that they never opened. And then when we call to try to help out, perhaps like make excuses for them lightly in a, they're like, well, no, actually we can see that.
It was sent on December 12th
And
at 12, and they actually opened the email, and we said specifically what to do.
And they did not do it. And then we sent a follow-up in 2 weeks, and another follow-up, and so you're like, oh,
Right.
that's unfortunate. I don't know what to say.
So unfortunate. And this is real, and it does happen, and again and again,
Yes.
including this year. And so we can't belabor the point that that is, demonstrated interest used to just be a student applied early decision. And we'll talk about the definitions in a second. But that has really moved to a student applying early decision, yay, that's the greatest way to show demonstrated interest. But visiting the school, yes, but the simple
Just-
opening the email, that
Yeah.
is really, really important.
And they can see how long, like if you click the links in the email.
Yes, yes.
Sigh, sigh.
Yay! So how can you stay in the loop? First of all, we are very accessible. You know where most of you know where we live, where we work.
And we have our new big office now.
And, yes.
It's so much more fun to hang out in.
Yes, we want to show off our new big office. But the way electronically, email is great, but through SCORE. SCORE is really the place where you can see your students' academic information. You can see the list. Students have already started on creating the list under my colleges. And it's really funny. The students, we talk a little about control, the controllables. Your students have control in SCORE of how to delete the lists and how to add. So Mimi and Matt and I add schools and we suggest schools in SCORE, and parents can do the same. And students can move them to not following.
Yes.
And so they really have control. And it's funny though when...
And then if we try to add something back
Yes.
that they've deleted, it's like, I'm sorry, they're not interested.
Yes, yes. But then it's really funny, and you can see how capricious sometimes this process is in the mindset of the 18-year-old when the student's like, yeah, actually I'm interested now. And we're like, well, you've got to add it back. We can't do that. But we love SCORE. We switched from Naviance to SCORE a couple years ago, and this is super user-friendly. This is where we keep a lot of information. Perhaps you've used SCORE last year, maybe when you were looking at PSAT results or practice ACT results for 10th grade. This year, we have asked students to fill out just some general questions about what they're looking for in a school. And so there's some survey information that we've gleaned. You all have been asked to fill out a survey also on SCORE. So
There are some
Yay.
people here who have done it. I'm not going to say
yes,
it.
yes.
But if you haven't, don't feel bad. You're in the vast majority.
Yes,
And there's
yes.
still plenty of time. There's
Yes.
still plenty of time to access that. Really, I'm most interested in having that information by this summer.
Right, it's helpful.
When we're working on our counselor recommendations.
Yes.
So don't worry. And I can imagine it may be like kind of emotional because it's all these
Yes,
questions about
yes.
great stories about your children
Right.
and things we might not know. So yes.
Yeah.
Just at some point, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So here's what the college list looks like. And then the way that this actually works for your students is we start in the suggested or the following, And then when a student is applying, usually they're just gonna click and drag over to applying. And then that sort of is really great because it gets the student, I think there's some reminders that they'll get from SCORE.
Yes.
And then we also get an email, because we are attached to your student SCORE account once a student has moved over to applied, so then we know, that's our key, okay, we need to send documents. We're a small enough school where we've had conversations with students. A lot of times this is happening in our office.
But sometimes it's happening in the dining hall
Yes.
when we might not remember. Like it's across the
Getting
salad.
my
They're
sack,
Like, I hit
yes,
the
yes,
like I
yes.
hit submit on this. I'm like, please, 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 like mark it on SCORE or come by the office and tell us because I'm
Yes.
not gonna remember right now.
And just let's play that out. If the student isn't checking their emails and creating a portal for each school, you'll hear the word portal a lot in the next year, then the student doesn't know that we haven't sent the transcripts because they didn't move it over at SCORE. So they told us in the dining hall. So that's why we laugh about that with kids, but we're like, no, really seriously, we're using this is our, this is the hub. So we love SCORE, and then the students, some students are really funny and they are tracking this religiously and they can see
Yes.
how many documents out of how many are due. They can't see which documents have been sent, but I had a couple of emails like, Ms. Kedelka, it says only 7 out of 8 have been sent. And I said, yes, actually, because I can't send your mid-year grades yet because
You don't
mid-year
have them.
grades don't exist. But it's good. The checks and balances that SCORE gives us is really
Yeah,
delightful.
and it does, again, so once an application gets moved to applied, then you can also see the date that all of the forms we have to send go in. So everyone can stay on top of it.
Yes.
And just so you know, if you go on your child's account now, the schools that aren't following, there's nothing final about the list. And some of them just added a whole bunch of schools
Yes.
just to like get more information about them, or just because, because of March Madness, I don't know.
Right.
But there's not like, it's still very much.
SDSU might be the new favorite, or Florida Atlantic. If those schools pop up, then, forget Alabama, SDSU. But one of the things that Mimi and I have done when we have been working with your kids and Matt, you'll perhaps see Target, Reach, or Foundation for some of the schools that are on the list. And those are our categories for where we're gauging the students we're hopefully creating these balanced lists. And so we want to make sure that students have likely foundation schools, that there's target schools, and those are really schools that your students' academic ranges are really in profile for where our kids have been successful in admissions in the past year. And then the REACH schools are where our students a lot of times might be right there in the ranges. They're just more highly rejectable schools. I really don't like that term, but the most selective schools our kids may have listed, or we have listed as REACH. So we've asked students to go in and to fill in those categories, but then we have also worked and it's been great sitting next to students looking at the scattergrams that are in SCORE, and the student might have said, oh, I really think Elon is a foundation school. And I, next to the student, say, actually, Elon is going to be more of a target or more of a reach for you. So it's really good for us to have these conversations. We are realists. We are,
We're realists on the conservative side
Yes,
when
yes.
it comes to designating these categories for the schools
Yes,
on
yeah.
the kids list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes. And one thing for students, and the schools that are most highly selective, have an admit rate in 20% or below, and there are schools with an admit rate that's 5% or less. No matter how wonderful the student's academic record is, it could be impeccable, it's still a reach for that student because it's a reach for everyone, and that's hard.
It's hard, and it's so hard not to take it personally. We take it personally, and we know the students, what more could I have done? And nothing.
It's just, those are the metrics.
Yes.
And this graph here too, I don't know if you want to talk about it, Amy, too. These are called scattergrams. And they show all the green dots would be examples of students who have been admitted given their GPA on the x-axis and test score on the y-axis. And then the red are denies, and I think blues are waitlist. So it can be helpful for students to see where they fall on the scattergram. They're a little less accurate now with the test optional landscape. The GPA is still very accurate, but the test score metric.
And you may go through your students' list and click on each of the scattergrams and find it's empty. And that is just because we don't have enough information, we don't have that many students from VES that's applied to protect their privacy.
Right, yeah, it's just VES data.
Yes.
On those. All right, so that's score. And at the end of this semester, you're going to get another report through a service called College Kickstart. And this is a newer service that we've been using that we're huge fans of. And what we do, usually this is in May when we've worked with your kids on narrowing down their list more to schools they're sincerely interested in. They can explain why each school is on there. We put all of those schools into College Kickstart. College Kickstart also has your child's GPA and their test score, if they're planning to send test scores to some or all schools. And then we do a list check, and the list check is making sure the list is balanced, that there's a nice balance between those foundation schools where they should be admitted, the target schools where they'll be competitive, but we can't know for sure, and then the reaches. And then it gives them a grade, which can be stressful to see their list grade. And you can see this one got a B+, slightly aggressive, and it gives that information. So then it will give advice about how they can improve their list to make it like an A in terms of how balanced it is. But you'll see these reports are really slick, and it will give further information about the likelies, the targets, the reaches, and they'll even have an unlikely category too, which again, that can be a hard conversation, but it's important to know if it's a far, far reach. And then it gives feedback, like if you want this to be more balanced, maybe prune your targets and add a reach and eliminate unlikelies.
And what I really love about any analytical people in there, you're gonna love this. What we like is we can go in and manipulate the data based on, it's all where so there's national information, but there's also information about where our students have fared in the past couple of years. And there, we will talk in a bit about some huge changes in college decisions from one year to the next. And so we really try to keep this up to date. So again, it's just another piece of information for students to make really wise choices about their list, about how I'm applying. Am I applying early decisions? Should I apply early action? Yeah. This is super helpful.
And this makes recommendations too about when students should apply, whether it's early action, early decision. And it gives some like great organizational information too, showing again how strong merit aid is at each school, which is really helpful, and also need-based aid, and it shows how many supplemental essays are required, how many recommendations are required, just like a ton of great information. So look forward to that. I think once we run that report, we give full control over College Kickstart to the students, and some of them get really into it and use it all throughout the summer.
Yeah, we can see the roster of how many times students have run the list. So, you know, it's like, and the average scores. So when we go down and we see, you know, the grade changing from C to A, we love to peek in there and see.
We can also see how often they log into SCORE, and we can also see how often you log into SCORE, full disclosure. So those are just fun features.
Yes. We don't need you to check your emails, just log into SCORE, please.
Yes. Okay, so we've used the terms early decision, early action several times. We just want to, and I know a lot of you have sort of first student going through the process, so we wanted to clarify those for you.
Right, so early decision, it is sort of the ultimate proposal is how we think about it, and we talk to students. Early decision is binding. If a student is applying early decision to a school, they're essentially saying, if you accept me, I am coming. I will withdraw my applications from every other college, and you are the one for me. And the colleges know that. Many colleges love that. It really helps predicting their yields. They know you're coming. And so the question would be like, why don't I apply early decision to like 5 schools? And the answer is because you're signing a contract that you're only applying early decision to 1 school, and the school, you know, this is, we sign the contract, you sign the contract, and the student signs the contract. So, and then we send transcripts to the 1 school, and it's great. Early decision can be a wonderful way for students to apply for different reasons. If the school is a school financially that you think this is great, we could do this regardless of any kind of financial situation we're in, that might be, you know, a really great decision. Each college has on their websites a net price calculator, and so before any student decides to apply early decision, we really make sure that everybody's on board with that. And using that net price calculator is a great way for parents to see, okay, this is doable. We can, you know, we can do this.
And I was just at some schools, like I was at Washington in the info session a little while ago, and they are now offering full financial reviews for families who are considering early decisions, so you can know really clearly what the financial aid package will be before you make that decision. So the net price calculator is great, and it gives an estimate, but if you're very serious about a school, many of them will do that. You know, give them the numbers they need, the info they need, and they will tell you what the financial aid package will be.
Yes. Early decision, we talk to students very, we try to be very clear. For a student who is interested in this school, they are really within the academic profile of this school, it could be really beneficial. Even if they're like maybe a smidge below what the overall academic profile is, this could really be helpful. If a student is applying to a highly selective school and it is a far, far reach, you know, we never tell students they should or shouldn't apply a certain way, but we really, we help students really identify which application process is the best for them. Sometimes applying early decision might not be the wisest choice for students based on certain academic profiles.
Like, well, I'm imagining a situation, like if a student is deciding between like a school that is a far reach, like super selective, and a school that's just that's close, and they like them both, like, if they're comparable, yeah. It's like, okay, do you want to be done in December? Do you want to, you know, your odds are much better to apply ED to the low reach than to the far reach. But if they're like, I will not be able to sleep at night if I don't know what answer I would have gotten from Harvard. It will bother me forever. It's like, okay, then let's do it. Yes. Not that Harvard has ED, they're REA.
Right.
But anyway.
And early decision, most early decisions are November 1st. And students will find out Thanksgiving to Christmas. There's early decision 2, and some colleges have early decision 2, some don't, and that usually those deadlines are January 1st-ish. And those are some students who've decided late, oh, I really want to go to this school, or some students who maybe applied early decision to school A, maybe weren't admitted, and then want to try early decision at a different school. Early action and early decision were probably the 2 application plans that the majority of our students use. I would say most of our students had applied to at least 1 school by November 1st.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, for sure.
Early action is an earlier deadline. We see early action with a lot of our big state schools. South Carolina, Georgia, Clemson, early action, not binding. Students apply earlier, they find out earlier. Mm-hmm. And again, some people are like, why wouldn't I do this? And some schools will say, why wouldn't you? Come on, apply early action. We don't necessarily deny at this point in the application. We may defer and look for more information. Other schools will say, yes, apply early action. We can defer, we can deny, we can admit. So we try to be really, just really on it with students at what's the best plan. Because if a student needs a strong senior first semester, then we might say, hey, hold off on early action. We want you to apply regular.
You want to put your best foot forward.
Yeah.
And if a school can deny from early action, you might be stronger in regular.
Right, and then we get into some of the nuances. Restricted early action is kind of like early decision. A school will say so restricted early action, I think 2 schools may have that now, right?
There's
Yale,
Harvard.
Stanford. So
Yeah.
students can apply to Michigan, right? Students can apply to the school, and they can only apply perhaps to the in-state university of wherever they live.
Yeah,
Or they
they're not
can
allowed to apply ED anywhere,
Right.
and they can't apply early action to private universities usually for REA.
Very limited. That's
Yeah.
a small. Regular decision. Essentially, all schools have regular decision. Again, we work with your kids to decide the best way. Regular decision at some schools. What we found this year, they are using regular decision on a space available. For students who were applying to Virginia Tech this year, there were, students are going to be admitted early decision and early action. We really usually don't recommend students apply regular decisions at Virginia. And so we
Yeah,
kind
because
of,
they don't use the first semester grades, so
No.
there's no reason.
no,
to
and
no
same with South
benefit.
Carolina.
Yeah.
So then rolling, there are many schools that you apply and you're going to know 4 to 6 weeks later. And
Or sometimes even less.
yes.
That's so fun. Yeah, as soon as they have all your stuff, they're going to make a decision and tell
Right.
you. So we love that.
Yeah. So
Great.
those are the, yep.
Yep. And the outcomes that can come, admit, yay, that's awesome. A conditional admit, sometimes they request additional information like end of year grades before making a final decision. Spring semester admits are becoming more common, and we've had several students who received spring admits. That means find something great to do that first fall semester. It can be a gap semester, do our wonderful program, and then come join us in the spring. And that's great for some kids. They're like, I want to take a gap semester anyway. But there's the side effect that, oh, will I miss out on all those first meeting my class and all of that. So it's something to think about. Defer decisions usually happen in ED or EA, and it means they want those first semester grades to make the final decision. A wait list is a decision usually from the regular round, but UNC doesn't defer, they just wait list. And that means you will be added to a pool that they go to if there's still space available after May 1st. That's the universal decision deadline by when students are supposed to have deposited somewhere. And then of course there's a deny, and sometimes students say can I apply again, regular if I'm denied early? And no, they can't.
And we constantly have, conversations in our office oh, wait list. Why did they just deny the student? But wait list sometimes works out for students, and we have seen definitely an increase of colleges offering wait list spots as application numbers increase and colleges figuring out how to navigate through this increase. Waitlist is an easy
It's a buffer
answer.
for them.
Yeah.
Right? If they're having a hard time predicting who will attend,
Right.
the wait list is their buffer. All right. So we will also, at usually the first meeting next year, at the start of their senior year with students, we go over the students' responsibilities and our responsibilities in the process. I think we've said most of this already, but they need to keep their score list up to date and be paying attention to the deadlines on there. We ask that they complete applications, including essays, at least a week before the deadline. That gives us time to review them. If we are getting documents to review the day before, we're not going to be our best selves as editors and helpers at that time. And you can imagine that there's 12 other kids who just gave us last minute things too. So to make sure we can be our best for our students, we ask for everything a week ahead of time. Have to pay attention to standardized test deadlines, sending those official scores from the website when needed, checking email, reading our emails and the college
We're gonna
emails.
bold that and make
I
it
know.
21.
I know. And then coming to see us during free periods and evenings. We are here a lot in the evenings, much to our family's dismay, in the fall to help the seniors because that's when they work best. That's just teenage brain science. So they get in the zone and do their best work on college applications in the evening.
And it'll be so nice in
Because
our
we're in our
new space.
I know.
Instead
It'll
of
be like a
crowded.
party.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And our responsibility is to make sure we get all those school forms sent in a timely manner, that we are accessible and advise students on all aspects of the process and review their applications and essays. We really want to read everything over. It's not required. Sometimes students are like, do I have to? I'm like, you don't have to. Would your mom be upset if you like didn't have us, read these, or your parents? Because we're here to do that. We work directly with college admissions offices to advocate for students and make sure we are giving the most updated information, and we try to share that information out with all of you. So that's our end of the deal. So we share that with them. Okay.
Yay.
I know this is long, but we have some tips, and we're going to be fast. And ask questions if you have them, or comments, or your own experiences. Feel free to share. Okay.
Yeah, so we don't want this to control your next. Oh, go ahead.
So we keep hearing about how some schools are seeing like record applications.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Like, is it? I mean, we're not in a huge baby boom right now with these kids.
Yes.
Is it that other schools are dying and they're becoming so bad? Like why?
That's such a good question. The Common Application makes it really easy to send in a lot of applications, right? Especially schools as they like rein in the additional essays they need. And a term has become pretty common in our office that students use, seniors use, and that's stress applying. Yeah. And they're just like, you're going to be so mad at me, but last night I just stress applied to 3 more schools that weren't on my list. So can you send my stuff to this school, and this school? And they're like, sure.
But Katie, to add to this, so we walked in here with students tonight, and one of the students was like, gosh, I applied to 5 schools, and I said, how would you, which is really nice, listen, I said, well, how would you have done it any differently? And they said, I would have only applied to the one that I wanted to go to, but I was so stressed out about not getting in these other ones, I felt like I had to. And so in some, in some instances, and actually most instances, I think kids just feel like it's a runaway train, and they feel like they're on it. So that's one reason. The other reason is during COVID and test optional, kids who thought, well, oh my gosh, I never would have had a chance before, but now, I might not have super test scores. I'm just gonna see.
Let's just see what happens.
So that's the second reason, and then y'all are gonna laugh at this, but I kid you not, and this is coming straight from some college admissions friends. Athletic contests, and when there's upsets and games and things like that, I mean, it is no, we'll cover this later. University of Tennessee's applications this year almost tripled. And so, our friends in the admissions offices are like, wow, in years past, we would have honored, students, they're very clear and transparent on their website. If you have this GPA and this test score, you're admitted and you're getting a nice merit-based scholarship. This year, we have so many applicants that fall within these ranges, I don't think we're going to be able to admit them. So, I think that's a silly example, but it's a real example. And, for the 18-year-old who's some more directed than others, think, that looks like a really cool place. I could see that. And so, and social media, I think, and having friends that aren't just living in our small towns anymore, but they're from camp or they're friends that are here, and I'm seeing what's happening at TCU and SMU and Pepperdine, and so then it's sort of like, well, why not? You never know.
Yeah.
Are schools because of this are they saying this across the board, is this the amount of applicants that we're accepting early decisions so that we're 70% there before all the math?
That is such a good and complicated question.
We went to a few schools over break, and 2 of the 3 very clearly said that they fill over 60% of their first year class
with
early
ED.
decision.
I know. And we can share with you, we can put on here a document that shows the difference in ED admit rates to ED. It's really dramatic at some. Right, but then there's a whole ethical issue with ED because some families can't afford
Well,
to make that
that's an
commitment.
access issue. I was thinking
Yes.
of myself, because I'm like,
Yeah.
we're one of those families that can't
Right.
sign an $80,000
Right.
check on day one, so.
Right.
So I was talking to one college about a couple months ago, about a student who applied ED2, and they were, giving me sort of feedback at the pool, and they're like, we are not gonna be one of these schools that admits 40 or more % of the class ED. So, like, our ED admit rate is not going to be so high. So that's like an institutional decision each school has to make. I think when they get over 50%, it gets kind of uncomfortable for a lot of them. But it also, like, makes their life so much easier because their class is set.
But
So-
Katie, I think that question is so good, and what, sort of the role that we play, and how we really huddle with your kids and talk about your voice and understanding why you would want to go to this school. And really, even the schools that aren't necessarily demonstrated interest high on the list schools, it's really important if, Brooks is like, I visited the school and I loved it, and here's why, and this is why I saw myself there, and here's these things, and my academic profile is right in here. That's the understanding the mission of the school. And I'm not, it sounds like I'm saying sell yourself, but in a way it's sort of like I want you to understand why we're a good pair.
Yeah.
And so that is sort of the,
And this is a tricky thing. We make them articulate that, and that's great when the original list, but we never say, no, you can't apply. So if we
Right.
get a Teams message during Thanksgiving break that someone stress applied to 5 more schools, we're like, okay, we send their stuff. It's just then when they are making their decisions at the end, they sort of have all this noise, and suddenly I applied to schools in
yes.
wherever, and do we go visit?
Why?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, if you apply merit or ED,
Uh-huh.
you're putting all your chips in.
Mm-hmm.
So what leverage do you have on anything merit-based at that point? Because from their standpoint, it's like, they're coming.
Yeah.
So why would we
Right.
even discount
Yeah.
them? Not even financial aid, just because you said WNL will let you screen,
Yeah.
pre-screen, but
Yeah.
from a merit-based perspective, I wouldn't give them anything if you're just from a
Yeah,
calculus standpoint.
I think that's why you want to have those conversations on the front end. And a lot of times, big merit scholarships are sort of run separately. So at WNL, they have the Johnson Scholars, and it says really clearly on the website, we, ED applicants have just as much, there's no preferential treatment for non-ED applicants in this. I mean, I think it's something to be aware of, and it's a reason to have the conversations on the front end when that piece is important.
But it's nice in College Kickstart in the report you
Yeah.
can get, and it's very clear. You can see which schools are that these schools are going to give more merit aid than these schools. So you kind of have and we have a really good idea. We had a student this year that really wanted to go to a particular school, and know that school does not usually give a ton of merit-based aid. And so it was a hard conversation, and the student and parents decided, then I can't. And it's so nice to have those decisions at the beginning of the process, to say, it's not gonna work out, I need to move on.
Yeah.
And that's fine. With 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States, there's gonna be,
So
Do they ever report the merit based upon whether an ED decision or not?
I don't think you'd
No.
see that
Yeah.
published, but if my daughter wants to apply ED somewhere and is really excited, I'm getting on the phone to their financial aid office and just making double sure. Am I correct in assuming that all the merit aid is still on the table and all
Yes.
of this? And I'm writing down, and who did I speak
Yes.
to?
So when you say the merit aid is still on the table, how do you even know what's in the realm? So
It's a lot of times on the website.
Yeah.
If you go, let's say Wofford, and you
Okay.
look up scholarships and financial aid, usually they will have a whole list of different merit scholarships, the presidential scholars.
And maybe
the-
they'll even say 85% of our
student-
students receive merit-based
Yeah.
aid. So you can look at the percentages, and then that's when you call the admissions and say, is there somebody I could talk to? Here's where we are. We're in this range. But remember, financial aid is different than the merit aid.
Sure.
So there's some schools we love. It's very transparent. The merit, if you are here and if you're here, then this is what it's going to generate.
It's just a table. Here are your
Yeah,
grades.
some
here
are like
this.
that.
We think you're going to be 50%.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you don't haven't seen that you go ED
Yeah.
and they're like, yes. sorry.
No,
But,
no.
and there's a like dark and twisty part too, and there's an article from the New York Times from a few years ago that like went into the dark and twisty part of schools that like figure out using like a separate agency and metrics how much merit aid they need to get your kid
Right.
to this school, and like so that's
And we have had, actually, 3 students in our combined 40 years of doing college admissions or college counseling. In all of our combined years, we've had 3 students who've applied early decision to schools where financially, for whatever reasons, it didn't work out, and the students they withdrew. They were released from an early decision.
For
That's
financial
the
purposes.
only students, we've had.
yes.
That has happened.
It's a little
It's
icky,
tricky.
but
Yeah.
usually, if there's clear financial reasons and the parents have contacted the school, the student has. I mean, we all sign the contract, but they're not sending lawyers.
Right.
But it doesn't feel good, it doesn't reflect well on the school, on our school, when those are broken.
So your most important role as parents, and as some of you experience the role of the travel agent and the driving the bus driver and visiting schools, it is a really fun time. And really gone sort of are the days of like, we'll just visit after they are
Yeah.
accepted. We really are trying to shift that to, visiting first and then making those decisions. And then being the cheerleader. Mimi and I all the time, we celebrate our kids' interest in schools and acceptances, regardless of prestige, regardless of where they are on what is that list? I don't even know what it's called. The U.S. News Report. We don't have the U.S. News Reports in our office, but we really do. We cheer. Our students apply from a range of schools, and we celebrate that those schools. And then the financial aid application coordinator is something else. Financial aid in the past, October 1st is when those FAFSA deadlines, or the FAFSA
Becomes
opens
available.
up. This year it's changing to December 1st because there's some
They're
tricky
transitioning.
changes.
Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah.
We'll keep you posted on that. There's some changes to the FAFSA. I think it's
It's
more of a
simple.
big
It's
deal for
becoming more simplified.
the class of 2025
Yes, yeah.
has more changes than yours. They're
Yeah.
just shifting the deadline. Okay, this, and again, some of you have heard all this before, but these are just our best tips that ring true over time. If you can pick one time a week to have the college conversation and make your child commit to having that conversation, whether it's on the phone or in your dining room or like go to Starbucks, and during that time they have to answer your questions, but in exchange you will not like sneak attack them with questions the rest of the week. It's a really good deal.
We love the sneak attack.
Yes,
I know, they know you do.
the
They
car
know
is
you.
the best time.
That's right, right when they're next to you, their seatbelt in.
Yes,
But
yes.
like that's where you get the like really tense, like, oh my gosh, I'm just waiting. She's gonna ask something, right?
Yeah.
So if you can be like, no, I'm not gonna ask in the car, but we're going to have this conversation. Like, I'll buy you Frappuccino, and we're gonna talk about it. Like the families that have made this work say like 2
Yes.
thumbs up.
And if you're getting nothing, call us.
Yeah.
We are your friends. We are your
We'll
partners
intervene.
in this process.
If they don't uphold, they have to
Yes,
uphold
yes.
their end of the deal
Right.
too. But then you have to not sneak attack. If you need some information, like again, we can help you, or you can say like,
Yeah.
I don't know, can navigate that if it happens. But yes, they know when you want to ask those things.
I feel like we've covered this.
Yeah.
Finances. are
It's important from the beginning for kids to know what the financial parameters
One thing,
are.
actually, one thing we didn't probably cover is when you're looking at colleges and you're looking, as those of you who have visited, you're looking at sort of the bottom line, there is the sticker shock sometimes of,
Yeah.
this is how much the school costs. And I think sometimes what happens is families think, well, in-state, we're going to our in-state school because we know this is what it is. But truly, there are so many private schools that do offer merit-based scholarships and that do have healthy endowments and that do have really good financial aid, that, you know, it really is worthwhile in kind of digging into some of those other schools, that it's not, you know, don't be freaked out by the sticker shock automatically.
Yeah.
There are ways, yeah.
I was just gonna share, our daughter, graduated 21. She wanted to go to Clemson. We live in North Carolina. They don't give a lot of scholarships. So we ended up regrouping because she loved Clemson football.
Yeah.
But, we found out about Anderson University.
Yes.
And Anderson had a great merit base, very clear, like they are super clear about,
Yeah.
but we found out you have to apply early, not early decision, but
Yeah.
early,
Yeah.
because they give the money out
Yeah.
sooner. So ended up, her merit base actually brought her down below what a state supported
Yes.
school would have
Yeah.
been in.
Yes.
So
And
that-
Lisa,
so
that's
much
such a
better.
great point, because you're right. There are application deadlines, and for some schools, there are merit-based deadlines.
And during that time, it was test optional. So, and everybody's like, oh, good, but she had already started taking the SAT earlier.
Yeah.
So we did some super scoring, and thank
Yeah.
goodness, because had she not done the test, she wouldn't have been an option for merit.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that was a real kicker. I was so thankful
Yeah.
that we actually had a private college counselor that worked with us prior to her junior year, so that we were kind of
Yeah.
working towards all of that in advance. But that was a game changer
Yes.
for
Yeah.
us.
And we have that on a next slide too. That college kickstart report you'll get shows all of those financial aid deadlines. So that's really helpful. So, and it will, you know, it makes the group like apply before November 15th to this group of schools, and it will factor in.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's a good story. All right. And then just to always remember, each student goes through this process in a unique way. It is a learning and growth opportunity. Going back to that portrait of a graduate, they really have to live out all these qualities we've all been trying to cultivate in them. It can be really easy to compare your child to the other child, her friends, or the other children in his class, or your previous children, but they, you know, they all sort of follow their own path, and they will not be like their siblings. So we're
We
on
tell
the journey
kids all the
with
time,
them.
comparison is the thief of joy. But also we don't want to compare, because truly things change from year to
Yeah.
year. And so I think if an older sibling, you know, were accepted at this school, sometimes we might have like, well, you're a better student, you'll be fine, or something. You know, we really, we don't do that.
Yeah,
you know,
every year is different.
yes. Yay! And so your kids, and you have so much support. We love this visual because it's not that we're serving your kids and we're giving concerts every night on this cruise ship, but we do offer tons of resources. You can experience college counseling and the application process this way, or you can navigate the rough waters.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that there won't be rough waters necessarily, but Julie, the cruise directors, are here, but we, as much as we try to go knock on the door and get the kids to come out, they really have to come, and they have to take advantage of everything that our offices offer.
They have to
Really
meet
do.
us too. And we'll, like, there are some situations where if we have a student who's just not responding to us, is not using office hours, is sort of blowing us off, we'll contact their advisor, we will contact you.
Yes.
If we're concerned. But we do like to try to give space for them to use those life skills.
We're not beyond the Friday night study hall if we have
Yeah, we
to,
will. We'll
but
put
we
them in
really
front
don't
of
want to
study
do that.
hall. Yeah, but then we have students who come to see us every time we're available too, and we love that. That's great. Like, that's so fun. And then we miss them when they're all done applying. But it's the circle of life. Then the next one's coming
That's
along.
right.
Okay, so just quickly, and keep jumping in with questions, and this is really sort of the last piece. Some unique challenges of college admissions now, today, in this post-COVID era, with all the shifts that happen because of test optional. Do you want-
Yeah, so we definitely, you know, I like to talk about Auburn just because we saw such a drastic shift from 2021 to 2022. So class of 2021, Auburn was very much, for some of our students, a likely or a foundation school. Those same kind of academic profiles of the students the year before, we were sort of really in shock. And so Mimi and I are on the phone constantly with admissions counselors at colleges, and we found that the test optional shift for Auburn really kind of had them change the way they looked at their in-state students versus their out-of-state students, drastically changed. So in College Kickstart, where Auburn was kind of considered moderately to lesser selective, changed drastically to selective for out-of-state students. And so I think some of our students this year, had Auburn as like, oh, but that's one of my more likely, and Mimi and I were like,
Actually, it's not.
it's not. And, so things changed. Auburn is a little test flexible. If a student has a certain GPA, you don't have to send test scores. But like Lisa said, our students who find favorable hear back from Auburn, send test scores.
Yes, we have not had a student who applied test optional to Auburn get admitted
Right.
in the last 2 years, even though they're technically test optional. And this includes students who were admitted to UNC.
Really kind of surprising. So surprises there. NC State, also, a few years ago, we started seeing NC State's admissions become a little bit more selective. And again, this year we found, reading applications a little differently, only looking at maybe first choice majors and that early application read. And then, if students are deferred, looking at that second major. Major matters at NC State. That's what I meant to say. So looking at that first choice major, super important at NC State, as it is at Clemson and as it is at Virginia Tech. But NC State kind of was surprising, again, for the same, reasons. Auburn, Tennessee, we covered that. That was the
And that's
shocker.
really this year. Like, it's shifted so much. I mean, it was a school that for a lot of our students was a foundation or likely, and it's just like, will not be that anymore in the foreseeable future.
Yes, and then some of the selective colleges with early decision.
Yeah, and we sort of covered that too,
Yeah.
that a highly selective school with an ED option for students who do not choose to apply early decision, it's very hard to predict how those outcomes will go. So our advice given all of this, if there's a college you love, ideally a target school, that's really nice, and it has ED, and finances seem manageable, like, give that a good think. If you're like, I can't make that commitment, then that's fine, but just have a good think about that if that's an option. And if that's not the path you decide, find as many reasonable ways as you can to demonstrate sincere interest in the schools where you're applying early action or regular. Some say they don't track demonstrated interest, including UVA, but most of them
And
do.
yes, and what I would say is I think there are some schools that may not track demonstrated interest, but certainly there's parts of the application for
Yes.
you to show interest.
And certainly once it gets to a wait list, they track
Yes.
demonstrated interest, because they only want to offer spaces to students who will take
Yeah.
them.
Yes, yay. So the Southeast, those Southeastern schools love test scores still. Florida was the one state that never went away from test scores during COVID. So just sort of not funny stories of having students like travel miles to try to find a test center because schools were closed. And so they were like, we're not giving the test. And then, anyway, that was sort of crazy. Georgia requires test scores now. Florida, Tennessee went back to test scores.
And those are just for the public universities, so private
Yes.
schools in those states don't have to.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, those are just
Universities.
public, yep.
This year, Ole Miss had gone test optional. Now we're seeing University of Mississippi asking for test scores. MIT will require test scores again. Georgetown.
Georgetown's policy is, like, if you truly cannot find a place to take the SAT or ACT at this point, please write us a letter explaining that and giving us all your reasons why you cannot, and then you're like, okay.
But also
clearly everyone can
Right.
take them.
Georgetown wants every test the student has
Yes.
taken every time. So in the application, you're saying, I'm sending you, where some
Everything.
students want a super score. They want to
Yeah, and
solve.
Georgetown's not on the Common App.
Right.
They do it their own special way.
Yeah, so Purdue, University of Michigan, and Auburn test flexible. And if you go back to that FAIR test, it's great. You can find out more information about individual schools. And then Auburn. Auburn is interesting in that they'll accept AP scores instead of test scores if you have a certain MA. So each school might do it a little differently. And then 50% of schools have not yet officially sort of announced what their testing policy is. Our students that are applying to UVA, we now know they are test optional next year.
Yay for
UNC
your
is test
class.
optional. It was crazy. Last year when we did this presentation, UNC said they were requiring test scores. And then I think 3 weeks later they said,
changed
no,
their mind."
we're actually not. So
Yeah.
we try to stay really updated. And then several schools, and Lisa,
And this is just your
point,
example.
still require scores for merit scholarships. Or what they are requiring merit, very clear if you have this SAT or this ACT and GPA, or in small print, or students can apply through this competitive merit base where they have to fill out all the scholarship application, which is great, and they could do that, but if they have the scores, it's automatic. Whereas these other competitive ones, you don't know.
Yeah. So all this to say, our current guidance regarding testing is unless you know your child's primarily interested in schools that are really committed to test optional, and there are many of those. Wake Forest has been test optional for decades. Most of the private liberal arts schools in New England are test optional, and they mean it. Swanee's test optional, George Washington. Many schools were super happy to shift to test optional during COVID. They were like ready to do it. Washington and Lee was ready to go test optional even before COVID. So if that's the group of schools your child is excited about, that's great, and they don't have to put much energy into test prep if you're all on the same page. If they are not sure, if they're exploring a wide range of schools, it's probably a good idea to put some energy into test prep so they have scores there to use as they need them, and it's not November and they're saying like, shoot, I wish I tried, because that does happen every year. We can provide as much info we have about the testing preferences at different colleges. We'll keep doing that over the summer as things change and are finalized. But again, for students who experience a lot of anxiety about testing and just never feel like those tests have reflected their ability, this is a great time for them.
And
There
I
are
don't think we
so many
mentioned the
schools that are
UCs,
test optional.
University of
Yeah.
California system.
Test
They're
blind.
test nothing. Well,
You
they
can
won't
send
look
them,
at it.
they don't want to see them. And there's more schools becoming test blind too, so that's great. And that's such a huge system, and it's hard to imagine how they do it, but they do it that way. Okay, quickly, test prep options. Your kids have been the first ones to have access to our free test prep option through Mindspire. I know we are working out the kinks this year, but I'm so happy for those students who were able to check in and use those weekly services. They are still offering those through the end of this school year. So if you want to hear more about that, I have a few students recently who have asked if they can do the free Mindspire course until the end of the year. That is great. And I'll just, you can look through this. These are all different ways your kids can do some preparation for standardized tests that they're taking, whether it's in April, over the summer, or early fall next year. Several of these are cheap, like working through a book. It's free through Khan Academy for the SAT. There's reasonably priced paid online courses through those services. A lot of families who really want to dig in do hire a private tutor for help. And these are some great one-on-one online tutors too. So, testing.
How quickly do the test scores come back? These kids are taking them in what, first week of
3
April?
weeks.
In 3 weeks, that
Mhm.
quick, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
they're pretty fast. They're been used,
Yeah.
fast.
It's nice that it's electronic.
And
we're not
your
doing it
kids,
manually.
this is the last class that will not have to navigate
Oh, yeah.
the transition to computer-based SAT.
Digital test.
Yep.
Oh, they
Next.
still fill it out?
Mhm.
Scantrons, huh?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
That's fun too, going through and making.
Yeah. And this is kind of a hard message, but it's true, and we'll tell your kids this too. It's college admissions really isn't a fair process, and I think for many of them, this is the first time in their lives they've encountered something where you could do everything right, put your whole heart into being the best applicant possible, and it still might not go your way just because there's not enough space at the schools. And this is obviously primarily true at the most selective colleges. More students get turned down, more great students get turned down than are admitted. And that's really hard, and it doesn't feel right to a lot of kids, but it is what it is. It's just space and their businesses, and these admissions reps fall in love with your kids and then don't have space for them. And I would never want to be on that end. I'm glad we're on this end of the job. So these are the goals we try to steer our kids towards, creating a smart balance list, learning to love your likely and target schools and not just the reaches, and doing all they can to present a strong, authentic application that conveys their interest in the schools too, and then trusting that by April they'll have great options. Like, it does work out. And then, again, we call the very low admit rate schools lottery schools, and it's, again, playing out this year as it always does. Like, if you could see, like, our super strong applicants year, the hodgepodge of admits and denies and defers and wait lists, it's like...
And we really wish that we could put together, this is why, rhyme and reason,
Yeah.
but truly...
you can't know. It's the school's institutional priorities that year, right? Maybe they need to add linguistics majors. Maybe they need to add, students in this area or that area or from this place. Like, we can't know. It's an important factor in how they're making their decisions. So we always talk about lottery schools.
And then once we have the applications and they're out and then decisions are coming back, we start singing Let It Go in our office. Really, like down the hallway.
We really do. It's
Let
a
It Go, you hit
little
submit, let it go.
Or
And
that
then
quarter is like, oh my gosh.
Yes, but even, when decisions are coming in for students, there are tears of joy, there's tears of sadness, and I am on Jet Durham with some seniors, and so I was on duty the night that some of the decisions came out. There were some happy tears, there were sad tears, and so we're there through it all and allow the kids, the sad tears, just, give it tonight.
Yeah.
And the school is really dumb for not accepting you because, for whatever reason, this is just how it is, and then we gotta let it go. And move on. And so it is tricky because we ask kids to go through this process and fall in love with schools. Yeah. And then when they feel like they're rejected, it's a personal affront, of course. And we take it personally too. Yeah. But the Let It Go mantra is, a very healthy, resilient, the way to
It wasn't easy for Elsa either, but
No.
it all worked out.
It does all work out.
Yes.
It does. And then the most important thing, we try to help support your kids and to look at this through the lens of this is part of their well-being, right? And when we start seeing things that may be a little unhealthy that creep up in this process, that's when we really need to up our conversations, right? We want to support our kids focusing on all different types of schools. Mimi said it best. I think really finding love in the targets and the likely are really important, not just the reach schools. Support decisions to apply only to test optionals. Sometimes we have conversations and the students are like, okay, really? Like, shouldn't I apply to 3 more schools? Like, should I do this? And we sometimes are like, no, this is really okay. This is fine. Support requests to have a manageable senior year class schedule. This is a really important piece. We sometimes have kids that really want to overface and take maybe too challenging of a schedule, some maybe not challenging enough. And so we really try to help kids with that balance and understands that this is really what's going to be best. The last thing we want is for a student to take a really unmanageable senior first semester and blow really a GPA they're proud of. So we want to try to keep it in sync. And so tell people who ask about culture, this is a
It's
good
my
one.
pet peeve of all the
Right,
world.
so I know the Fentons are in our Kroger all the time, and so.
Oh, Thomas,
you know,
does he have a first choice? Does he know where he's going yet? You must.
Yes,
You
and
must.
you're like, I just want to get my darn spinach or whatever, And so we try to give kids their voice, and we joke around and we say, oh, keep them options open, or he's waiting to reveal it at the last,
Yeah.
You don't have to overshare. We try to help the kids understand they don't have to overshare.
And the same's true on social media. Like, you apply to school, then there's a button like share on Instagram that you just applied. I'm like, no, like
Yes,
don't
don't
tell
do
me,
it.
like you don't need to share your.
We've had
business.
one too many stories of a student, the day the notifications are coming out, and the student is there, and y'all seen the videos, the friends are behind the
gosh.
student when they, click the email to find out. And we just, we really discourage that.
Yeah.
Um,
So I have to say, and I have this, and I should show it because she said I could. I had a student, not from this class, but the year before, who did that for her ED, and had all her friends around right in this room, and they're all filming her. They're filming her, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you got it! Like, of course you got it." And she did not got it. Like, she did not get in, and she just started crying. And they're like,
And her friends'
don't know what to
reactions
do.
behind were so
So sweet. Like, her friend, they're like, they're the worst. Like,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
exactly what you should do. Like, they're the stupidest school in the world.
awful.
But she made this video. She's like, I'm going to share this because this is what really happens.
Yeah.
Like, this is what really happens. And, like, she bounced back and with amazing options. And I was just so proud of her. And she's like, I'm glad we filmed it because, like just the fact that it takes you to that, like, it's so emotional.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
anyway. So she did. She shared her sad video,
Yes.
which I was, like, proud of.
So feel free to use those words in Kroger. Keep it a surprise.
Yeah.
And then, we are all advocates, and you're advocates for your kids. So it is okay to have that one time a week and then to move on. They're still kids. They're still 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-olds going through this process. They have other interests. They have lives. They've got sports. They've got theater. They've got lots of things going on in addition to this.
Yeah.
So we remind kids this process doesn't define them, and the college doesn't define them either.
Yeah, that's a good way to redirect the Kroger situation. Like, well, but let's talk about lacrosse. Like, let's talk about swim season. There's other
Right,
things.
lots of other things.
And you love that book.
And then Mood Prep, we love Mood Prep. Yeah, there's so many books, and I think what we saw during COVID and what we see in the past couple of years. I think with students and anxiety and mental health, I just think it's really important for us to all kind of stay on the same page if we're seeing anything that we feel like is off.
Yeah. Again, this is probably redundant, but college admissions outcomes do not determine your child, much less your family's success up to this point, much less their self-worth. There's so many variables beyond their control. And again, these admissions committees, they fall in love with kids that they have to turn down. And that makes me sad for them. But people do find their space at the end. It's a subjective process. There is not a formula, especially with the highly selectives. And it does, I feel like we set things up, not we just like the United States, set college admissions up to seem like this big culmination.
Yes.
But really, if you take a wide angle lens, it is just one of many life decisions and twists and turns on their journey. So we just say, remember to check that big picture view often. It might feel like everything, but really it's just one little thing. And more book recommendations, because we always make book recommendations. The valedictorians at the gate is a really helpful one, digging into the highly selective admissions. FIS Guide is our recommended overview of many different schools. They have people on the ground there so they can really articulate the differences in different campuses. It doesn't feel like a commercial. How to Raise an Adult, Julie Lythcott-Hames. He used to be a dean at Stanford. Talks about her own kids' process, but then she came out with a second book where she admitted she realized she didn't do a lot of things right along the way.
I love Where You Go Is Not Where You'll Be. We've got lots of copies of that book in our office. I wish we could give one to every one of our families. That that is a great book.
Yeah. Price of Privilege, we had Madeline Levine here years ago, who she does a great job of keeping things in perspective. Admissions Matters is a good overview of the process, as is the last one too. So, and you have this presentation if you need to go back and look at it. I sent it in an email earlier. But this is the main thing. Teamwork makes the dream work. And we're all in a team together with your kids, and we're just excited to help you and see how things
And Coach Porter, he's
And
here.
Coach
He's
Porter.
here in spirit on the.
on the driving the
Yes.
minibus as we do at the Virginia Episcopal Schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Yay.
Thank you. How long was that? We were a little over an hour and a half.
Okay. Does anybody have questions? We tried to cover, we were sort of quick and speedy.
If a student applies to early decision, do the other colleges know
No,
that? Okay.
no,
No.
they don't.
There
Not first
is
choice.
like there's always like the urban legend of like there's some nebulous like electronic way that, these schools know, but no, they really don't know.
No, they just know they didn't apply ED to their school.
Yes, which is important.
How do you know when demonstrated interest is important versus not important?
It's on that college kickstart list too.
Okay.
One of the metrics it shows is how much, and it's like little stars, how much is demonstrated interest valued at the school.
But it's surprising, Denise, because I think sometimes, and what we found this year for a student who was waiting to hear from a certain school, and I was talking to an admissions counselor because they hadn't heard, and I was kind of surprised, and I said, oh yes, they just had visited, and she said, well, that's really helpful, I'm gonna mark that down, and I was like, what? Like, I didn't think you, and so I was a little surprised, and I think the sort of the big takeaway is if you're on the campus and if you could do the campus tour, make sure the school's there.
Yeah, we have sad
Yeah.
stories about, students who multiple times went and hung out with a
Right.
friend and loved it, but never had the official visit, so weren't noted in the record as ever having visited, yeah. And that's the thing, things can change. I feel like demonstrated interest never hurts, it's helping the students learn more about the school.
Yes.
A school could decide to track demonstrated interest at any time, so just like.
And
everything
demonstrated
else.
interest also, and I think this was really elevated during COVID, being on campus is, great. The virtual visits that students can do, that's another great way. There are some schools that offer opportunities to hear faculty talk about certain subjects. There are, so, really kind of navigating through like, oh, there's an open house, but there's an open house specifically for this engineering program or this. And I think taking advantage of any, if kids can take advantage of that, that's really important also. Yes.
So like if your child's invited to like a sports like team camp because they're looking at your child, as they're looking at hundreds of others.
Yeah.
And then they do like a campus tour with the camp and all of that. Does the school have that documented or is that?
That's a great question. So what I would say is every school underneath their athletic page has a recruits questionnaire. And so we, suggest kids fill out that questionnaire and they may say, have you been on our campus? What have you? And so that's a good place to put it. Also, I think that in the filling out the application, it's just helpful for the student if they're answering a why that school to be able to, have that information in that section.
I would say I would hope they would.
Yeah.
I would hope they would, that they've made that connection. Yeah.
And it's typically the coach that's
Yes.
inviting, so.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say same thing, like it can't hurt
Yeah.
then to, if it's a school that visits here, right, which a lot do in the fall, to say like, oh, I was on your campus this summer, and then they'll be like, oh, and they'll, take note of that, just to find another way, if it's a school that he loves, to like make sure.
Yes. And there's so there's the common application, and then we talked about the different each colleges have their own pages and questions, and there are certain schools that ask, how did you hear about us? Have you been recruited by a coach? And so the students can give that extra information.
So for demonstrated interest, the in-person one, is it equally weighted as the virtual session, or is one better than the other?
I think visiting in person when possible is always like the best, but if a student check in like directly with your admissions rep. Most pages you can find who the area rep is, and if that's not possible, we can help figure that out too and get in touch with them directly. We've had students sort of send emails to admissions reps saying like, I'm disappointed because I thought I was going to be able to visit campus in September, but now it looks like we won't get there till just that kind of checking in. It can make a big difference.
And Mimi mentioned college reps visiting our school. That's something that we see a lot of traffic, usually September, October, where colleges will come and we invite them to have lunch. Usually it's lunch, and we invite students to come and join the reps at the table. That's a really cool way, and a lot of those schools, they have the students fill out the little information card. And we do have college admissions reps that will say, they didn't visit me when I was there, or I remember when they visited when I was there. So
yeah,
if
and that's when we're like, oh, they must have been at an away game.
Right. They were visiting your school that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
So I think just rule of thumb is to do, for them to do what they can. Good questions. Yay. And reach out to us. You're probably going to think of 12 things in the card that you meant to ask.
Thank you for coming.
Can you share a little bit about what Steve Farmer's going to do?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm so glad you said that because I meant to. Okay, so we're extremely excited because for Family Weekend, which is so soon.
April 22nd.
Yes. Steve Farmer will be joining us. He is on our board of trustees. He's also the head of enrollment. He's
like the provost for
yes,
enrollment
at UVA. And he, we usually do like a session like this or play a game, but instead this time we have Steve Farmer with us, who we are going to ask him some questions, and then he will also be answering questions for parents too. He's also worked at UNC. He had the same role at UNC for many years, so he is an amazing resource.
He's like one of the
He's so great too.
Yes.
He's just one of those people who we speak to, like, oh my God.
Yes, and just really provides this great insight on institutional, what's important to universities, and he just provides really the expert way to look.
And we'll be able to sort of share his, snapshot of this past admission cycle that will have, just be wrapping up at that point. So it'll be like a week before their final yield day. So for him,
he just has everything that comes out of his mouth is gold.
Yes.
Perspective he provides.
So genuine and just a wonderful
So
person.
thank you, Rebecca, for saying that. We're so lucky.
So just to put in a plug, that is Parents Weekend, April 22nd at
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Register if you can on the website.
Yes.
You can go in and just select what events you're going to attend, and there's a really fun party that night.
Yay.
That's right, mandatory fun.
Yay.
Yes.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Can you tell us, share some insights of this recent admission cycle?
Just this
Yeah,
this current one. Well, we have one more week till we sort of
Yes,
have the full
yes.
scoop. I feel like the biggest differences for this admission cycle compared to past ones are probably number one, more schools asking for that self-reported academic record. And it is a pain. Usually it takes students about half an hour to 50 minutes if they've been at multiple schools to fill it out. But once they do that, the students are expecting, the colleges are expecting students to update everything themselves through those portals. Whereas even like a year or two ago, I think more was coming from our office.
Yeah.
They're really putting more on the students' shoulders. And those tend to be bigger schools, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Tennessee. There's a big handful of schools that a lot of our students tend to apply to, who are sort of putting more on the student's desk than ours. And again, that's where checking those emails is more important.
I think another sort of one of the things that I saw this year, probably more waitlist decisions.
Yeah,
and so
a wait
that
list.
was not totally surprising, but again, I think with the increased applications and colleges looking at that yield protection, it's very safe to offer a waitlist spot until colleges sort of figure out where that May 1st, with the response from students, and then they can kind of, work through that waitlist.
Mm-hmm. And just again, thinking about the more selective schools, like, I don't even know if you could sort of graph the outcomes of, you know, different students. You know, like this student who was very strong, was admitted here, waitlisted these two, and they're just all over the map. The good news is everyone has some option already, even though we haven't gotten all the decisions.
Right.
I think that they're excited about,
Yes, yeah.
but it just again speaks to the lottery school and institutional priorities and how hard it is to make predictions at the most selective schools. What else? I'm trying to think. We were really fortunate this year at UVA Early Action. Very fortunate, but I think the probably for a student who was admitted, the lowest GPA was just over 95.
With a extremely rigorous,
And that was arts and
Coursework.
sciences.
yeah.
But yes, it's a grade-wise and strong senior class.
Yeah.
And lots of wise.
Yes. So I think what it means, the way that we look at it, and sort of transitioning to this junior class, like Mimi said, we're realists. We're bent a little bit more in conservative side as far as predictions. And so going back to Katie's point, like we don't want to add 20 extra schools to the students list. So we really try to look at each student very uniquely, taking this, you know, and the analytics from this year's class and applying it to sort of helping make that balanced list for this next group.
And I think our mantra with your kids will just be that authenticity piece, especially with this AI era. I think it's a strength of our kids anyways. I think Amy does a great job of making sure for those like extra supplemental essays, students are really understanding the mission and the vision of each college and finding ways to weave that in, and hopefully it resonates and they're like, yes, that's what I love too. And hopefully if it doesn't resonate, they're like, oh, maybe I don't need to apply here because I'm not the right fit for this school. So I think being authentic in their investigation of different schools and then in really letting their voice come through.
And I think it means even like on the granular level, like we had a student who, you know, was really interested in this school and sort of, you know, waffling between certain majors. And so we saw a lot of that, this sort of existential crisis of what do I put as my intended major? And so that was actually really what I sort of thought might have been an easier like night of going through and just checking the box was then tears or, oh my God, what is the difference between this and this? And so it was, you know, they're fun conversations, but sort of for the 18-year-old, but how can I choose right now?
Right.
And so, but at the granular level, having that student really research what this particular program looks like at this school versus this school, because there's some nuanced differences, you know, in the biology department at UVA than there might be in the biology department at Johns Hopkins versus the biology. So looking at those, you know, how that takes shape is really what Mimi's talking about, the mission or the scope of what this particular school's mission is and what they're looking for, and does this feel right to me? And if so, how am I gonna make sure that I get that point across? I guess that makes sense.
Questions? All right. Well, send them our way. Send us emails. Let us know if you want to meet and have one-on-ones. We're super happy to do it. I'm so sad Matt
I know.
couldn't get here.
He's gonna be sad.
I know. So,
Late
thank
night
you.
for the shuttle driver.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.